Hey there, it's the real Jason Duncan. I've got a special announcement for you really quick. I am hosting the Exit Lifestyle Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, February 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2022. You don't want to miss it. Go to theexitlifestyle.com to learn more. These stories that you hear on The Root of All Success are so great, and you got to go back and listen to these episodes. Make sure that you subscribe because you never know who I'm going to talk to, like who's going to be that person that you're going to connect with. It's going to be that person that you resonate with. This show is about showing you how these successful entrepreneurs unlock the door to success with these 5 keys of passion, place, people, preparation, and plan. So you got to go back and listen to these. I've had people on this show that have millions of followers on Instagram and on social media. One guy, JJ, was on my show recently. As a matter of fact, I just recorded it recently. It won't even come out until January because this episode that I'm recording now is going to come out at the end of December. His episode comes out in January. He has had 57 million views on YouTube.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Well, welcome back to another show for The Root of All Success. And actually, this is a very special show. I'm the real Jason Duncan. And today on this show, we're going to be reviewing the first full year of episodes for The Root of All Success. So if everything goes right, this episode should be released on the 30th of December, 2021, which is 1 year and 1 week after the very first day that I ever recorded an episode of this podcast. I want to today give you not only a review, we're going to talk about some of the highlight some guests that have been on the show, but we're going to talk about some of the cool ideas that we've been through in the show, things that we've talked about, places that I've been to record, some misadventures of the show, and the people that have helped make this show possible. We're going to talk about all those people today as we finish out the year 2021. But thank you for joining. I want to start before we get into the actual meat of the show today. I don't have a guest. It's just me. But before we get into the meat of the show, a couple of things. Number one, I want to say thank you to the C-Suite Radio Network. C-Suite Radio Network has been kind enough to take our show into their portfolio of shows and syndicate us on all podcast players. So no matter where you're listening to this, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, wherever it is that you're listening, or any of the players, it's because C-Suite Radio Network has taken us in their network and has allowed us to be part of their network and then syndicates us for the show. So our viewers and our listeners have grown over the year because of C-Suite's involvement. So I want to thank those guys for helping me do that. Thank you for believing in me and the mission of the show. So thank you very much for that. I also want to say thank you to the team at 2 Market Media. Steve Carlos and Hank Norman are the managing partners, and they have been coaching me through the production of this show and to get guests on the show for the last, not the entire year they've been doing it, but for the bulk of that time, they've been helping me. And their team now does all of the editing. And so Danielle, I think she's the one that does all of the actual editing. I know she's watching this and editing this as it comes out. So thank you. You do a great job of putting this together, not only for the audio version, but for the video version. So we're on YouTube, of course, at youtube.com/TheRealJasonDuncan. So you can watch this. So today I'm actually recording this from my home studio here in Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. And the 2 Market team does a great job of editing this and getting it out there. So thank you to all the people that helped make this show work. And we're going to go through all the folks that I want to thank for making the show. But let's get into kind of the meat of it. So back several years ago, I thought, just like a lot of people do, I want to start a podcast. I want to do a show. I want to talk about something. I want to get behind the microphone or in front of the camera, and I want to talk about something of interest to entrepreneurs. And that's kind of the genesis of the idea of why I wanted to do a show to begin with. And then, of course, other things take precedent. You got more things that show up in life, and you just get busy, right? And especially busy running a business, because I run a business. I've been running energy lighting services since 2010, and I successfully pulled off the exit without exiting a couple of years ago. And then I've gone on to start several other businesses. I've got an investment company. I've got a real estate investing company. I've got an e-commerce company that I started this year. And most of all, I've got a coaching and consulting company, TRJD Enterprises, that I started in January of 21 to formalize my coaching practice. I've been coaching entrepreneurs for years, just casually and outside of a formal LLC, but I formalized it all this year. So this podcast is kind of an outcropping of that new coaching business. So even though I wanted to start a podcast, I never really got around to doing the podcast until I hired Mitt Russo as a coach. So the first person I want to thank, who also was a guest on the show about helping me make this show a reality, is Mitt Russo. So Mitch, I know you listen to the show, and I want to thank you for being not only my coach, but a friend and a faithful listener to the show. Mitch was on the show and shared his story back in September of 21 about how he has been helping entrepreneurs and how he built businesses, and how he was on the brink of death when a phone call interrupted what would have been almost certain death and let him live another day to become the successful entrepreneur that you and I know today. But when I hired Mitch, and you can hear about that on his show, just go back. I think it's episode number 32. And that came out on the 16th of September of 2021. But, I hired Mitch as a business coach, but because I believe that everybody needs a coach. If you're an entrepreneur, you need a coach. You got to have somebody to give you better perspective. And that's really what it's all about. Because if you've ever said, never thought about it that way, it's because somebody helped you get a better perspective. And that's the professional job of a business coach. And so I hired Mitt Russo, and Mitch coached me, and a lot of the things that he coached me on all led to, well, what about doing a podcast? And ultimately I made the decision to start a podcast with him encouraging me to do so. So I went out and my wife bought me this microphone, which you can see in the video. It's a little blue Yeti. And it took me a year after she bought the microphone. Mitch was finally coaching me like, you got the microphone, dude, you need to do the show. Well, doing a show, anybody can do a show, right? But doing a good show, having good content, having good guests, that's another thing. So the first thing Mitch and I did was try to figure out, well, what's going to be my thing? What's my show going to be about? And between the two of us, we decided that studying these 5 keys of success, which has been something I had been casually doing for years, would be an interesting take on a show to talk to entrepreneurs about, did these keys work for them? Did they unlock success using the keys that I assume that all entrepreneurs have used? And as you've listened now to over 60 shows, you now know that in fact that is the truth. It is every single time those entrepreneurs have unlocked the door of success with those keys that I talk about on the show: of passion, right place, right time, knowing the right people, preparation, and plan. So I've recorded, as of today's recording, I've recorded 68 shows. And this will be, I think, show number 61 that's going to be released, because it's going to be released at the end, or 62 rather, and it's going to be released at the end of December 2021. I'm recording it just a week prior to that. But I'm thankful to Mitch for pushing me to do this. And between him and me, we came up with the name, The Root of All Success. We designed a little cover and a little cover art. And then we started coming up with questions and potential guests. I want to thank also a guy named Jason Wiese. Jason Wiese was a guest on my show. He was one of the early guests on my show. He's actually guest number 4. And I recorded and released his show in April of 2021. And Jason Wiese has been very instrumental, not only as a coach and advisor for me, but also as someone who's helped connect me with a lot of people that I've been able to get on this show. And so Jason's story, which you can hear, like I said, on episode number 6 from April of 2021, we talked about how he grew up wanting to play baseball, actually got drafted into the major league, and ended up not following through on that due to an injury, and ended up going into the practice of law and then into finance, and has been phenomenal helping me with my business and personal finances, and also as an advisor and coach, and being raised by what he referred to as 2 hippies who ended up living where they lived because the van they were driving just broke down in that city. It's a great show. You should go back and listen to Jason. And I also want to thank Jason Wiese for helping introduce me to so many interesting people. I also want to say thank you to Andrew Kilpatrick, who was guest number 1. And I met Andrew through Jason Wiese. What's interesting is that I met Andrew through Jason Wiese a couple of years prior to recording the show. And then Andrew and I stayed in touch, and we had lunch together, a little over a year ago, and kind of reconnected on some business things. And when I started the show, I knew that Andrew was in the center of the niche of successful entrepreneurs that I wanted to interview. And because he's such a great dude, a good, godly man, a good family man, that he would be very gracious on my first episode, and all the mistakes that I would inevitably make. And I did. I made a few mistakes in that show, but he was there day 1, episode 1, to be my first guest. And it was a great show, in spite of the fact that I had no idea what the hell I was doing. But thank you, Andrew, for being guest number 1. Now, let me talk about where I've recorded, not just go through all the guests, but I've recorded this episode. First of all, I first started recording the episodes at the Standard at the Smith House in downtown Nashville, Tennessee, there at on Rosa Parks Boulevard downtown. It's owned and operated by Joshua Sterling Smith, and it's 18,000 square feet of Southern sophistication and style. It's a public restaurant downstairs, a steak restaurant, one of the best you'll ever eat at. And then it's a private gentleman's club, but not the gentleman's club that you might be thinking of, not that kind, but just a good old fashioned Southern gentleman's club. And it also has women members, so it's not just for men. But I've been a member I guess I've been going there for 7 years or so, and it's been a phenomenal key to my life and success and as a businessman. And so when I wanted to do the show, it just made sense to record there. And so Josh and his team were gracious enough to let us record it. We started recording in the Matador room upstairs. The very first day we recorded was the week of Christmas in 2020. And my daughter came in. I needed help. Carrying the equipment, the lighting and the cameras and the microphones and setting up the computers. And I remember we got there early that morning and set everything up. And she did her name is Kylie Duncan. So if Kylie I doubt she ever listens to this, but if she does, thank you, baby. I love you. But she helped me set everything up. She took photos, and she did a great job that first day of recording. So Andrew wasn't the only guest that first day. I also had Meg Epstein as guest number 2. Powerful woman here in Nashville, an entrepreneur scene. Talks about her story of coming to Nashville just 5 years prior to being on the show, and building nearly a $750 million empire in real estate development here in Nashville in just 5 years. It's an amazing story. I got to go back and listen to that. Her episode came out in March of 2021. See, I started recording in December, but I didn't actually release until March because we had a few hiccups in the production side of the podcast. But how did I get people like Meg on the show? I didn't know Meg until she walked into the Standard that day. First time I'd ever met her, but I knew her husband, Stephen. And actually I had met through Jason Wiese. Isn't it interesting how we all connect? But Stephen ended up recommending that his wife come on the show. And so that's how Meg came on the show. And I know a lot of people have talked a lot about Meg's show being one of those early shows that they really liked, because Meg is such a powerful and amazingly successful woman. Stephen was on the show. He was at guest number 27 and released his episode in August of 2021. And Stephen is no slouch himself. They are a power couple of entrepreneurs here in the Nashville community. And Stephen and Meg have some amazing opportunities going on between the two of them and then individually. And so go and listen to their shows and listen to what they're doing individually in the real estate space and the healthcare space. But I've had other amazing guests on the show, and there's not a way for me to spend the time to go through all 60 plus guests to name them by name. But I want to talk a little bit more about recording locations. So it was always my plan to record these episodes live in person with my guest at the Standard, where the guests and I could have a drink and smoke a cigar if they wanted to, and we could be very casual and be more like a conversation, as opposed to so many podcasts are just audio or on Zoom. And I feel like that's not giving it all the effort that we could. And it took a lot of effort to get down to the Standard and park and lug all that equipment up 2 flights of steps and set it up and then tear it down and go back. But we started recording at the Standard, and I'm very grateful to the Standard and their team and Josh for letting us do that. But we started in the Matador room. But then I had a guy, a friend of mine, by the name of Kevin McCutcheon. Kevin McCutcheon was guest number 20, and his episode released at the end of July of 2021. And Kevin owns Flight Solutions, and he lives actually down the street from me. And he has a hangar at the airport here in Gallatin. And he had the idea. It's like, hey, what if we did a show at the airport? And I thought, dude, that is a great idea. So we got it set up. It took us some time to get it set up, but we finally got that episode scheduled. And we had, of course, Kevin was a guest that day. And we also recorded Eric Albion that same day, but we did it at his hangar. And in his hangar, we had one of his jets, one of his helicopters kind of in the backdrop. And we sat in comfortable chairs, not across the table like we had been doing at the Matador room down at the Standard. And when we did that episode where we're leaning back in chairs and the microphones were kind of down below us, not just on a table in front of us, I told my apprentice at the time, Matt Jacobs, who I have a big thank you for, and I'll talk about him in just a minute for helping me get this thing going. But I told Matt, I said, Matt, we got to find a different spot at the club, at the Standard, to record, because sitting in these chairs like this was so much more comfortable for me and the guest. So after we recorded at the hangar at the Gallatin Airport, the Music City Executive Airport, we went back to the Standard and found another room to do it in called the office. The office is a cool room. We affectionately all refer to it as Josh's office. And we set up a couple of other chairs and opposite each other, and we recorded that way. And we only recorded 2 episodes in that room, and that was Chuck Garcia, who flew in from New York, who has his own amazing podcast, used to have a radio show on ABC Radio in New York City. Amazing entrepreneur, climbed, I think, 7 of the top peaks in the world, mountain climber, entrepreneur, great teacher. Had him on the show that day. And also Lance Goodman, who's a local guy here in Nashville, who's the CEO of a company called Spintel. And so Chuck, his episode was 24, and then Lance was episode 23. We recorded both of those back to back, and those came out in August of 2021. But what we found in that room in the office was that the ambient noise coming from the street was really loud, because the exterior wall on that room went out to Rosa Parks Boulevard. And if a fire truck went down the street, you could hear it in the recording. So as comfortable as the room was, it wasn't going to work. So we looked for another spot. And that's when we ultimately moved to the final place at the Standard, where we had been recording for quite some time. If you've been watching the show, you know that. And we recorded in the Rhino room. And the Rhino room was an interesting place. And the very first recording that we had in there, on 2 leather couches facing each other in a small room, very cool, had a black rhino horn on the wall and a lot of cool memorabilia in the room. The first person to come and be in that room was Brad Lee. Brad Lee flew in from Las Vegas to be on the show. And if you listen to other podcasts, he's got a very popular podcast called Dropping Bombs, but he was on my show. And what I didn't know is that he absolutely loves rhinos. He's got them all over his office, figurines, toys, statues. He has a tattoo of a rhino. And so when he walked into the Rhino room, he was really impressed by that. And he was the first guest to record in there. And I didn't know that. So it was kind of interesting. But Brad Lee's episode was episode 25, and we released that in August of 2021. Now, as I said, I'd always wanted to do all of these shows by in person and not by Zoom. And I had an entrepreneur reach out to me, a very successful and famous entrepreneur in Canada named Jeff Lopes. And he said, "Hey man, I'd love to be on your show. You can be on my show." And I said, "Well, can you come to Nashville?" And he said, "No, man, I'm not traveling right now." He said, "Why don't you do it by Zoom?" And I said, "No, I don't really like to do them by Zoom." And Jeff pushed back a little bit. He's like, "Man, you should be doing them by Zoom. You don't have to do them all by Zoom, but you can do some." And so I took his advice as a more successful entrepreneur than me. And I invited him to be my very first Zoom guest. And that guest, Jeff, was episode number 26. And that came out in August of 21 as well. And somewhere along the lines, we ended up started releasing 2 episodes a week. We started out with just one on Thursdays, and then we started releasing 2 on Mondays and Thursdays to give us, our listeners, you, more of the root of all success. And we also, interesting part about this show is that we originally didn't have corporate sponsors, but I was having sponsors of companies and entrepreneurs that I knew that would sponsor the show. And early on, if you remember listening, I would, at the beginning of every show, say, "This episode is brought to you by Nurture 360 or 19 or 8Bend Marketing or Energy Lighting Services," or whatever. Is all those early episode sponsors to whom I'm very, very grateful for their sponsorship to help us get out there in front of more people. But when we got picked up by syndication by C-Suite Radio Network, what I didn't know is that they were putting sponsorships in the show as well, but nobody told me. So I kept recording my own version of sponsorships, plus C-Suite was putting their sponsorships. And at some point, my assistant, Wendy, who's amazing, and I'm going to give big props to in just a moment, she came to me and said, "We're like doing 10 minutes of sponsorships and introductions on the show. We need to kind of cut that back." And I had no idea. So then I just relinquished the sponsorships just so the corporate sponsors that C-Suite brings us, and you will hear them at some point during the show. And since I'm talking about it now, why don't we go ahead and hear from a couple of our sponsors? Welcome back to the show. And again, those sponsors that you just heard are provided corporate sponsors by C-Suite Radio Network through our syndication agreement. And as I was saying before the break, I was doing my own sponsors and they were doing theirs. It was too many. So I just let them do them from now on. But let's talk about a couple of other people I want to thank for the show. I run an apprenticeship program called PEAP, P-E-A-P, stands for Professional Entrepreneur Apprenticeship Program. And I bring in young men, 22 to 29 years old, who want to be entrepreneurs and business owners, and take them on a year apprenticeship program and show them everything there is to know about building a business, running a business, doing the day-to-day stuff. Plus, they end up being my grunt, or for lack of better words, my assistant in different arenas on all the different businesses. Well, Matt started working for me in January 21, and he was very, very astute at putting together the technical equipment to get the podcast going. So my first episodes that I recorded in December, my daughter helped me with, but then Matt came on board in January. So he started helping me, and he was phenomenal. And I can't thank Matt enough. He was phenomenal at helping get the equipment set up, better lighting, better sound quality, the editing work, and then also just packing it in and packing it out every time. And I didn't have to do that. So thank you, Matt, for all of your help in making this show what it is today. And then I mentioned Wendy before the break too. Wendy Hughes is my assistant, and I hired her back in March of 2021 to be my personal assistant and executive assistant for my companies. And she came on board. She used to be the chief operating officer for a local chamber of commerce. And I had known her, but not really known her in the past. And so when she applied, I'm like, she's the one. She's definitely got it. And I want to bring her on the team. And she's been on the team and was doing so great and doing so many wonderful things for me. It was about 6 months before I looked up and realized I'd never did her 90-day review. And I guess you lose track of time when things are going well, and things were going well. And so now Wendy and I, because currently I don't have an apprentice on my team right now. If you're interested in an apprenticeship program, just go to therealjasonduncan.com/PEAP, P-E-A-P, and it'll tell you more about it. But so Wendy and I are left with lugging all the equipment in for every show and lugging it back out at the end of every show. And then she takes all of the SD cards and uploads them to our team at 2 Market Media so that they can edit and then send to C-Suite for syndication. So Wendy's pulling double duty right now on some things because we don't have an apprentice to help us out with that. But she's a good team player. And even though that's not her forte, she's doing a fantastic job of helping out. So thank you, Wendy. Thank you for all that you do to help keep TRJD Enterprises on track, all the different companies and all the stuff that we've got going on. So thank you for that. Now let's talk about locations again. Well, going back to old Jason Wiese, my friend Jason, who kind of helped me get a few early guests on the show. He had this idea. He said, man, Jason, you need to go to California. He goes, I'm from there. I know a lot of people, successful entrepreneurs in California. You should do a podcast tour in California. I said, okay. What cities you got in mind? And he said, well, I know a lot of people in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Sacramento, Northern California. We could do some there. We could do some in San Diego. And I said, let's do it. So he begins introducing me to people there. I start working my network, and we line up 14 guests to be recorded during the month of July of 2021. So Matt and I flew out to California to spend a week, Sunday through Saturday. It's 2 days in 2.5 days in Sacramento, 2.5 days recording in San Diego. And we're going to have this great time. And we did. And we went to Sacramento first, and we stayed at an Airbnb. We recorded at the Airbnb, which was really nice. And we had some great guests like Brett Swartz on the show. We had Anthony Trucks on the show. We had Lucas Robinson, Blake McCall. We had some amazing people on the show. Eric Peterson, that were recorded right there in Sacramento, and met some great people and had a great time. And it was Tuesday, Wednesday, I forgot what it was. We were finishing up recording for the day. We were going to get ready and pack up the next morning and fly to San Diego. And I got vertigo, guys. I'm telling you, man, I've never had it in my life, but I'm at the Airbnb. I'm on the phone talking to somebody, and I start getting dizzy, and I go lay down. And I think, well, maybe it's just because we've been recording all day, and I've done more than I normally do, and I'm out of town. Well, the dizziness got worse, progressively worse and worse and worse. And I had planned a dinner party in Sacramento that night with about 20 people, and ended up not being able to go. And got up the next morning and found a clinic to go to, and they said, "Yeah, Mr. Duncan, you have vertigo." They, coincidentally, or not even coincidentally, but just funny thing is they also diagnosed me with diabetes and high blood pressure and all kinds of stuff, which ended up not being true. But they had me scared to death to fly home because I thought I'm going to die because I had all these ailments. But really, I only had vertigo, and it was so bad I ended up having to cancel the rest of my podcast tour in San Diego. Ended up flying home, feeling terrible, feeling like absolute dog crap. Got home, and I spent really 5 days just essentially in bed, couldn't do anything. It just, the dizziness wouldn't go away. So if you've ever had vertigo, you know how bad that is. And what I regret about that whole thing is that I missed out on all of the guests in San Diego that were going to be on the show. And to this day, I've only had one of those be able to reschedule. And we've got more of those that we're trying to get rescheduled. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do them in person. We're going to have to do them by Zoom because I'm not going to be able to get back to San Diego anytime soon, and they're not coming to Nashville. But nevertheless, we press on. So today I do a lot of recordings by Zoom, as I'm doing today. And I actually recorded 2 episodes before this one, all by Zoom from here in my home office. But if you have been a very close listener and fan of the show, you know that there have been 2 episodes that have been released so far that have been recorded from yet a different location. We have a different location. We recorded a couple of episodes at my office at Energy Lighting Services in Hendersonville, Tennessee, which is where all of my live episodes for 2022 will be recorded. As much as we love recording at the Standard, it became increasingly more difficult and more complicated to get down to Nashville to lug the equipment in, lug it out. And the staff at the Standard, they used to be open during the day on Fridays when I record, and now they're not. So it just causes extra hardship on them. So we just made the decision to move all recording to my office in Hendersonville. And so we've got a nice little setup there, and we're going to be dialing that in over the next few weeks as we get 22 kicked off for the Root of All Success. Those 2 guests that I had on that show that we've already recorded there, one of them was me. I was the guest. Actually, Dr. Justin Mosley came in and interviewed me on my show to talk about my story, because I hadn't really yet shared my story on the show. So that episode was released just earlier here in December. I was episode number 55. And then episode 54 was Rebecca Satori, and we recorded hers right there. And she flew in from Maryland to be on the show. And she was such a great sport because we weren't planning on recording at my office that day. We were planning on recording at the Standard, but something happened and we couldn't get in. And so we had to call an audible and move it to my office in Hendersonville quickly and on the spot. So Rebecca, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for being such a good sport. And she liked the Standard so much. I took her there the night before the recording to show her, and we had a drink and had dinner there at the Standard before the recording on Friday. She liked it so much she's coming back to Nashville in January for an event that the Standard is hosting. So looking forward to seeing you again, Rebecca. So other people that I've had on the show that are worthy to kind of point out, worth noting, that are memories for me, is that one of them is the Biz Bros, Luis and Luis Camejo, otherwise known as Luis and Fonzie Camejo, from Venezuela, now in Jacksonville, Tennessee, or not Jacksonville, Jacksonville, Florida. And they invited me to be on their show. And that's how I got to know them. And I thought, these guys are awesome. They're hilarious. They're awesome. They're good business people. They do great marketing work. I was on their show and had such a great time. I invited them to be on mine. And we had a fantastic show talking with them about how they do what they do. And I've even hired them to do some of my marketing work for me. So anything you see for me in editing or micro content, probably Luis and Fonzie doing that for me and their team. So you might want to go look them up at Biz Bros or Content is Profit. That's their show. Also got a little bit of a fanboy moment when I was able to get Mike Michalowicz on the show. Mike Michalowicz is the author of many books. The number one business book of all time, as far as I'm concerned, is called Profit First. He wrote that book, and I live and die by it with all my companies. And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, man, I'm doing the show. I'm a huge fan. Would you be able to come on?" And sure enough, he agreed to come on the show. And so he was a guest on the show. His episode came out. He was episode 22, came out in August of 21. And wouldn't you know it, we had a Zoom issue. He came on by Zoom, and the video, I don't know what happened, but the video jacked up and it was terrible. Luckily, the audio still works. So if you go back and watch that one, there's not much video. It's just a still photo of him and a still photo of me, but it is all the audio of the show. I was so happy to have Mike on the show. He was such a great guest, and he was so open about his story and about how he failed and succeeded and how he became such a successful author and speaker and entrepreneur today. Other guests that I really remember, one of which is Dr. Glenn Toby. Sweetie G is his hip hop name. He's one of the founding members of the hip hop community back in the late 70s, early 80s. And he came on my show. He came in from Atlanta to be on the show, and came here to Nashville, recorded the Standard, and he got choked up during the show, like moved emotionally, because we were talking about some of the keys to his success and things that he had not thought about in his past. He's just a great dude and a good friend of mine now that we now know one another. I'm so glad that he was on the show. Another guy that was on the show is Greg Kimball. Greg Kimball hosts his own podcast called The Final Percent. He and I did a back-to-back show. I was on his and he was on mine, and he invited me to speak at his Final Percent Summit conference in Denver back in September this year. And I got to meet him and his family and do lots of cool stuff there and meet lots of other cool people. But he was on my show. He was episode number 29 that came out in September of 2021. A couple of other local guys here in Nashville that were on the show that had a big following, and lots of people ended up going and listening to their show. One is Tyler Cauble. He was episode number 44 that released in October this year. And he's a local real estate tycoon and still in his, I can't remember if he's late 20s or early 30s, but just absolutely killing it in the commercial real estate space. We've got Gary Vermont, who's a local guy here, lives down in Franklin, Tennessee, episode number 43. That dude is funny. He has, if I remember correctly, 13 kids. And I think that he made the joke on the show about this. He said that some wives collect purses, his collects kids. They've adopted most of those kids from different countries around the world and turned their lives around for the better. And he jokes about it, but it's absolutely a phenomenal and inspirational story and what Gary has done there. Joe Valley, the Exitpreneur, was on my show back in October of 21 as well. Joe's guest number 42, and he talks about his book, The Exitpreneur, and how he teaches people to prepare their companies for exit early. And he specializes in e-commerce. So you know me, I'm the exit without exiting guy. So it was really cool to talk to Joe. And he's got his own show. You ought to go check him out too. There was another guest on my show, Dan Vega. Dan Vega was an internationally known seminar speaker, workshop guy for years. Has now turned into a venture capitalist, angel investor, owns a publishing company, does a ton of really cool stuff, and is a good friend of mine. He's a consultant and advisor to me in some of my companies. And he came on. He was episode number 48, came out in November this year, and his story was really great about how he used math to absolutely get a foot in on the entrepreneur scene and make a name for himself. Now, there's only a touching of the surface of some people that have been released on this show. There's other great people like Katie Richardson, who is a phenomenal female inventor and designer who created a company worth millions. Was on the cover of Entrepreneur Magazine. She was episode number 57. Claudia Harvey, another amazing female entrepreneur, episode number 58. She's created a device, much like Katie did, created a thing, sold it, and turned it into multi-millions of dollars, and created an amazing story for her family, for herself, and for her community, and has used that to leverage into other businesses. There's Jason Rigel, who's one of my early guests, who is the proprietor of Guidance Whiskey, developed a brand, wanted to be the first Black owner of a sake company, but couldn't find a sake that he liked. So he ended up starting a bourbon brand as well called Guidance, and developed into an amazingly successful bourbon brand. There's Pierre Rogers, who he's episode 19, came out in July, who started a cleaning company just as a way to deal with taxes, and ended up turning into a multi-million-dollar company, and now has, I think, 200,000 monthly users in a cigar exchange online business. It's these stories that you hear on the Root of All Success are so great. And you got to go back and listen to these episodes. Make sure that you subscribe, because you never know who I'm going to talk to, like who's going to be that person that you're going to connect with. That's going to be that person that you resonate with. This show is about showing you how these successful entrepreneurs unlock the door to success with these 5 keys of passion, place, people, preparation, and plan. So you got to go back and listen to these. I've had people on this show that have millions of followers on Instagram and on social media. One guy, JJ, was on my show recently. As a matter of fact, I just recorded it recently. It won't even come out until January, because this episode that I'm recording now is going to come out at the end of December. His episode comes out in January. He has had 57 million views on YouTube. I'm interviewing some amazing people, and thank you for helping connect me to those people. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a part of this, because this experience has been so fulfilling, so exciting. I'm so glad that I've been able to have this opportunity to record this show. And I want to thank my wife, Christy Duncan. Thank you, baby. I love you, my best friend. You're everything to me. Thank you for buying me this microphone that I'm speaking into right now to make me want to go do this show, to helping me follow my dreams of doing the show. And thank you to everybody who's helped me along the way to be who I am. I want to say a special thank you to my team over at Energy Lighting Services, especially Mike Dalkey, who was also a guest on the show, one of my earlier guests on the show. He was guest number 18, came out in July this year. Mike and I partnered up between his company and my company for him to come in and act as CEO of Energy Lighting Services while I stepped away to pursue other ventures, my exit without exiting plan. And he and I have been good friends, and it's been an honor to work with him at Energy Lighting Services and his other companies to make this thing work so that I could do these other things. So Mike, I'm very appreciative of your friendship. I'm very appreciative of how you're running things day to day at ELS. And I look forward to how we're going to continue to combine forces, and how my next step in the exit without exiting plan is going to play out, because you're involved in that. And I would be remiss not to mention the 4 vice presidents at ELS who've really helped me pull off this exit thing. Nina and Brock and Ricky and Brendan, you know who you are. And thank you. You guys have been rock stars for a very long time, working at my company for a very long time. And I love you guys, and I appreciate everything you do. And I still pray for you by name every day. And that's no lie. I mean, sometimes I might forget, but it is an everyday thing that I do. It shows up on my phone and reminds me So thank you for everything you do there. There's so many people that we can all look to point to help us who've helped us be successful. And that, remember, is the third key to success, is knowing the right people. And by the grace of God, I've known some amazing people like the ones I've mentioned who've been guests on the show, who are friends of mine, who are coaches, who are advisors. And I'm so grateful that they've helped me produce a show like this. So 2021 has been an amazing year. First episode came out in March, the end of March. This episode's coming out the end of December. And this is episode number, if we're going by the numbers correctly, 62. Like I've released 62 episodes, and we've got more to go for 2022. So thank you for listening from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for everything you do to help make this show what it is. And if you are an entrepreneur who hasn't been on this show and you've got a success story, go to therootofallsuccess.com and fill out the form. It says, hey, I want to be on your show. I want to meet you. I want to put you on the show. Let the world hear your story. And if you've got a show, if you have a show of any kind that interviews successful people or entrepreneurs or people with interesting stories, I would be interested to talk to you about me coming on your show as well. And finally, as always, I want to say, if you are interested in learning how to live the exit lifestyle, maybe you want to go and start a podcast. Maybe you want to do more traveling. That's what I do every day as a coach, is help people like you figure out how to live the exit lifestyle. I have an exit accelerator group coaching method that I do. It's 12 entrepreneurs, 12 weeks, 4 steps. We take you through the 4 steps that I took to exit operations, to exit without exiting. It's not very expensive. It's a low dollar amount to invest in your opportunity and options to have freedom of time, energy, and money later. Go to exitwithoutexiting.com and check it out. And my gift to you is I'll give you $500 off the course. All you have to do to get that $500 discount is send me a DM. You can go to Instagram or you can go to LinkedIn. I'm at The Real Jason Duncan on both places. And you can say, hey, I heard your episode on the Root of All Success. You said you'd give me a discount. I'm ready to sign up. What's the code? I'll give you the code. You sign up and we can get started. My next cohort actually starts on January the 13th, and you can be in it. I've already got people signed up, ready to go. I've got a couple of slots left. You could take one of those slots and you can get a $500 discount if you just mention that you heard this show. Well, I want to explain one more thing before I sign off today for this show. You know that if you've been listening to the show, at the end of every show, I sign off by saying, I'm the real Jason Duncan and Jesus is King. And the reason I do that, just a very short explanation, is I follow Jesus. I've been following Jesus my whole life. I love Jesus. He's my Lord. He's my King. He's my Savior. And my one little way to let people know that that is who I am and who I live for and who I serve every day is to sign off on all my shows and a lot of my videos that same way, that Jesus is King. So if you've ever wondered why I do it, it's just to remind people, you, me, and everybody else, that in fact, he is the King. So with that, make sure you tune in next week when I talk with a very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success and how those 5 keys play a part in it. I'm the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King. Happy New Year.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.